Welcome to the Software People Stories. I'm Shiv.
I'm Chitra,
And I'm Gayatri.
We bring you interesting, untold stories of people.
associated with the creation
Or consumption of software-based solutions.
You'll hear stories of what worked.
and sometimes what didn't,
You will also hear very personal experiences.
and insights that would trigger your thoughts.
And inspire you to do even greater things.
Before we jump into today's conversation, a special thanks to PM Power Consulting for encouraging and supporting this show right from the start. With over 1,000 person-years of collective experience, PM Power has helped many organizations, teams, and individuals chart out their own journeys of excellence and make progress. Thank you, PM Power. Now, let's move to today's episode. Welcome to this special episode of the Software People Stories. This episode marks 6 years of the podcast. Thank you for all your love and support. So today, it's a conversation among the three hosts where we reflect on our own personal and professional S-curves and also ideate on what could be coming up next for the podcast in terms of the next S-curve for Software People Stories. We would surely like to hear from you, and do tell us what you would like us to do and what will give you more value. Listen on and do write to us. Hi Chitra, hi Gayatri. Good to get back together on the same show.
Always a pleasure, Shiv. Thank you.
Thank you for setting it up. I am so looking forward to this conversation.
Before we get engrossed in our own conversation, I think we have to first thank the listeners for all the love and support that they've extended for the past 6 years now, right? And that has been essentially the fuel that has kept us all going and to bring these untold stories from across the globe. So as I was reflecting for this conversation, I said there have been a lot of high points. Of course, there have been some low points as well. And S-curves or pivots too that we have done. Starting as software lifecycle stories, we pivoted to software people stories, which is again based on the feedback that we got from listeners who found the personal stories of people very interesting and that they couldn't find elsewhere. And then from being a solo host, thanks to two of you, now we became a show of 3 hosts. Okay. And we moved our hosting provider from Audio Boom to Hubhopper, which was not a simple task. Initially, we thought it was just a simple thing, but then even though we had about probably not even 100 episodes at that time, I think a little less, still took a lot of effort. And then we also got featured in some of these reputed podcasting magazines, which is kind of satisfying. And the availability also has increased. We are there pretty much on any podcast client, including YouTube recently. And surprising thing was recently looking at how we are performing, some of the stats. It said we are ranking consistently high in the careers category. Okay. In many countries, including Argentina, Finland, Hungary, Kenya, and Paraguay. I would love to visit those countries and probably meet some of the listeners to find out some in person and get some feedback. And of course, this has also been a period of our own S-curves personally and professionally, with the shifts in demand on our bandwidth due to both personal or the personal needs. So I thought since we are at a stage where we want to look at the next S-curve, and this has kind of become part of what we've been doing, we can probably mix both our personal and professional S-curves this period and any reflections. Gayatri, you want to start?
Yes, I would love to. In fact, I want to first share the personal story of being the podcaster. Many people, when I started, I thought, I'm becoming digitally savvy. And this is one of the digital tools that was easy to do and a lot more reach. And I identify myself as a podcaster, be it LinkedIn, be it wherever I meet. Apart from everything that I do, this is one of my realm that I thought, and I couldn't think of it 5 years back. when I joined. I think when I joined, I think we were just about a year in the podcasting. And with that 6 years as a period is also very rewarding for me as a person in my S-curve. For those who have not understood what an S-curve is, S-curve are curves which each of us take in our career, where you have to take a jump. And to some extent, we keep calling leap of faith in a normal lingo. It is just that, in terms of rather than staying in the same path and sort of getting a diminishing sense of return, to getting a leap of faith and moving into the next ladder. That all of us are doing, right, in terms of from college to starting the work, or from one geography we are moving to the other. So we do it, some of it very intentionally, some of it we get it thrown about. So for me, my biggest S-curve in the last 6 years has been that just the fact that I could be a podcaster, and learning all the so many tools in terms of, be it marketing tools that we have used, Canva, to editing tools, to just being able to portray the host as the guests very well. I think that itself was a knack that I learned through podcasting. And the other S-curve that I did is, I actually, from being a consultant, I moved to a full-time career in a bank, and also did a 25 lakh customers integration from one bank to the other. I thought it was a very rewarding journey in terms of my own career, and to a large extent, it also helped me realize that I could move mountains. At one point in time, we had 1,000 people working for this. So I sort of felt that, hey, I have always had that leaden power to move mountains. And to a large extent, I also want to call upon all our listeners for giving that confidence and freedom. Sometimes we are our own problem, right? We actually hold ourselves back. So when you speak to very different people and hear their problems and how they overcame, it gives a lot of confidence to say, hey, you can do this. So I think that's really my big S-curve that I have crossed. And personally, my other S-curve is, my son is moved to a college, and while it may sound very simple, that was a big S-curve that I had to personally, as a mother, to cross. And while stories have been written about having an empty nest, but nobody talks to you about your center of gravity suddenly shifting. And that I felt it took a long time for me to accept and figure this. I think thanks to all the podcasts, and I've listened to so many podcasts around people who have done that, been there, and kind of gives a lot of courage. So these are my S-curves that I want to share, Shiji.
Yeah. As I was listening to Gayatri, I have to go back to that day in November of 2018 too, when I remember recording my first episode, I think thrice. First is letting go. So I think that is sort of a series of mini S-curves for me, is letting go with the idea of what if. Thinking a lot about, what if this doesn't work right? What if this doesn't sound right? What if I get stuck and then I got stuck, okay, while speaking. So I think this being on the path to becoming a co-host on something like the Software People Stories, I think it's been tremendous personal growth as well. It's a lot of letting go. I love the fact that this has free-flowing conversations rather than structured, which has helped me, when guests ask the question, if you give me a few questions, I'll be more comfortable. I'll prepare for the answers and come. And sort of gently accommodating some of it and gently steering them through the conversation. And for me, one of the biggest moments of satisfaction or feeling good is when soon after the podcast, the guest says, "Oh, that was actually quite easy, and I'm so happy doing this." So that gives a sense of you help somebody with perhaps something they were also struggling with. Uh, Professionally, I think after, uh, my stint with PM Power Consulting, it gave me the courage to actually get into another stint with entrepreneurship and then start another podcast there as a way of getting people engaged. And I think that's what I've noticed when I did that is I think that's what you did Shiv, is getting people engaged towards um, a go-to-market initiative for an organization, right? And there were these, uh, there was one designer and one project manager who were wondering what to do next. And being a company that was uh, offering services around learning, marketing, and design, I said, let's do a podcast. And then, like Gayatri said, people coming up with things to their own doubts about what should we talk about? Will people be interested? How do we get this started? And then suddenly said that there are, you know what? There are 52 cognitive biases in user experience design. Why don't we just pick each one of those and you have 52 episodes there? So that made it easier for people to get started. And like you mentioned, Gayatri, the fact that you can do all the production around the podcast, you can learn how to do that very easily. In fact, that came very naturally because the company already had designers. So they found those aspects so easy to do that stitch the episodes together and prepare the cover art and so on. But the recording the episodes became challenging. And what I noticed in both my experience uh, in the early days of the Software People story, as well as the second podcast, which is called the Edge podcast, is those initial days, people are inhibited. You're going through all the motions of how do we get it right? How do we get started? And then how do we maintain the cadence with it? Which is a very nice thing to see as an observer, as a facilitator, as an enabler. So I think personally it's been very, very deeply satisfying to do something like this because I think it sparks that it gives a space for creativity, it gives a space for imagination. And recently I was watching a small movie clip. I can't remember the name of the film, but I shared it with my kids. And I said, today we are so force-fed with information in multiple formats, whether it's images, whether it's articles, whether it's music, or basically things that exercise our senses without us having to make any effort. Where are we making the time to exercise our imagination? And I think, doing podcasts and the way we've been doing it, which is largely encouraging conversations with people, keeps your imagination in your mind so alert. You are responding pretty much in the moment. That's been my experience as a host. And of course, professionally, from entrepreneurship to taking on the role of CTO, that too in a sector for which I had no prior experience, I think, I even seeded the idea of podcasts there. Of course, it's much harder to get doctors to talk, which is, and it helps me understand while, working with the marketing team there, nudging doctors to speak about how to, simple things like, how do you manage your diet and your lifestyle during the monsoon season? Or what is it that you can do if you have a chronic condition? Doctors are shy and quite inhibited. So I'm sure that they'll get there as well. But I think coming back to these little S-curves, Software People Stories has, given me a lot of courage as well as ideas to do different things. So I'd like to acknowledge that here.
Yeah, wonderful. I think our stories have been kind of similar. In fact, while I was into blogging and then creating content or delivering either lectures or training sessions and so on, this one was more of a personal goal that I had, saying that when I turn 60, what do I do, and something new that I want to learn and so on. At least the audio as a medium. But then what I realized was that content creation is not only telling, because this podcast is all about listening. It is all about the guests that come, they share their stories, which was a big change for me initially, from being very tense on, oh, I have to ask all these questions within this time, to saying just let's enjoy the conversation. Of course, during this period on the professional side, my next milestone, I said, okay, now 60 is fine. Now what do I do at 65? So I'm happy that this book has been published. It's a co-authored book on enterprise agility. And then the pandemic, of course, was a major impact in terms of the work style and dispersed ways of working. But fortunately, that was quite suitable for the podcast because we're always recording mostly remotely. And on the personal interest side, my association with this NGO called Dhoni Foundation has also become more stronger. And then seeing the impact we're able to create with many rural, small, grassroots NGOs is kind of satisfying. There's still a lot more to be done. And of course, on the personal side, after a long time, I did take a longish vacation. You see this picture at the back, which is just one of the clips, which is again very relaxing to spend time with the family. And with all these things, I think I would also like to acknowledge the support that Anita has been providing. Because some of the work that all of us used to be doing earlier, all the editing and the marketing, the publishing and all that, which has been really wonderful. Yeah, so I think we've talked enough about ourselves. We can probably keep going on and on, but segue into the next S-curve for the podcast. What are your thoughts on what we can do? This is more like an idea storming, and we'll see how many we can pick up. And hoping that our listeners will also chip in with their ideas and how they can also participate and contribute. Chitra, go ahead.
Yeah, I would like to chime with a few points. I think one of which recently spoke about is definitely looking at local language. And that is coming from a strong sense of, I think, my last 1 year experience with healthcare, where, 80% of the inquiries that come in a local language. When people engage with bots, they're actually typing in a Romanized script, but in their language, asking about whether we could address a particular condition, a disease condition. And, with the onset of LLMs in local languages by a lot of Indian companies, I think that's giving a lot of hope about what we can do. That is one thing. Second thing is, as one personal S-curve, I also managed to co-author a book on a topic that I never even imagined I would. I actually looked at it with quite a bit of disdain, but grew to understand what it means later on. So this is on branding. And by making the mistake of nagging my partner, saying, why are you spending so much time on this? One of them just came and dumped the table of contents in front of me and said, pick the chapters right so that you learn what it is. But in the process of doing that, we also understood that how, the other cities other than the big metros in India thirsty for people to come and engage with them, with the intent that they want to live in the places that they are in. Why should they always have to come to the city? And I heard at least 100+ students talk about this at the place where we launched the book. And I'm thinking, this would be a beautiful medium to reach out, to listen to their voices. So the voices of, I think what the vast majority of this country's population is, and giving them a space to do it. I know so many other podcasts have come in, but I think there is a space for this. If we take it to cities like Mysore, Hubli, Belgaum, and the pulse of people there is very interesting. Even in a state like Goa, where I've gone several times and spoken to local people, I think the younger people, there's a subtle shift. It's not very obvious, but there are many young people that really want to do a bunch of stuff right where they are. They don't want to, migrate to bigger cities. They believe, and the good part is that there's a strong sense of belief that we can do something here and now. So I think this is something we could consider for software people stories.
I think very, very well articulated, Chitra. In fact, one of the thinking processes, regionalization, is what you were mentioning in terms of how do we bring local ideas locally present. And it also resonates well with me in terms of sustainability and some of the solutions that are needed locally has to be communicated as well as garnered support in that sense. So while we talk about from a website to microsite, we also have to think about it from a podcast to do a microcast. And a microcast, when I say we could have a series only within a local area with a local problem, or it could be around people who are present in that. No, if you look at it, a lot of the job offers that are coming many of them seem to be coming as fully remote. So it means that pretty much you can work from anywhere. And we also want to reduce the urban weight that is happening and reduce the amount of time that we spend in our cars and to a large extent, why not, right? If the skills and attitude is there wherever we can, and high-speed internet is there, we should fully leverage it. And one is regionalization that I was thinking. I was also thinking if we want to reincarnate our, podcast itself as something in careers which are in motion. All of us, we're talking about S-curves, and many of our conversations also tend to be that, how they have taken their big next step and what are their decisions, what are their qualms, what are their challenges and stuff. So that's something that I'm pondering over, but I like Shivji was saying, we would love to hear what our listeners are thinking, because that's where we want to be. It would be great to hear as a feedback in either our YouTube channel or anywhere or your favorite podcast vehicle. Because one is from a careers, how things are, and other is the regionalization. The third is somewhat, creating a playlist of sort. One challenge and create a playlist from different people at different contests. And if that would be useful for someone like to hear it as a podcast, I have the situation and these are the three things. So that is something that Shivji, you used to use a term called discoverability, right? That's something that by nature audio doesn't lend itself very well. But I think if we can identify innovative models in which we can do it, I think I would really hope if we can achieve these three in our next S-curve for our podcast. But I'm interested to hear what our listeners want us to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I think to some extent, we've gone through a similar experience and then been hearing also from our listeners and all that. So thoughts are kind of similar. But I loved Chitra's take on reaching more audiences. Because one thought that has been crossing my mind is when we are talking about people who are not necessarily in the urban areas or in the tier 1 cities, whether all the content that we get from our guests, how do we make them available in multiple languages? Again, preferably in their own voice and audio. Yes, there are some transcript translations things that are there. The similar thing was also, I think, Gayatri, your listing is wonderful. The two ideas of one is about this narrowcasting This whole Prahlad's approach of while you have a lot of things for each one, it is kind of personalized or individualized. I think now we have sufficient content that we have enough for different profiles or different expectations that people might have. And the other thing that you mentioned also, I think, is very interesting in terms of the discoverability. How can I quickly create not a full playlist of all the episodes, but then just the pieces related to the topic that I'm looking at? I'm excited because I think it'll give us an opportunity again to learn some of the new technologies, to apply them in probably in a different ways. Like yesterday, I was talking to a startup based in Dubai, which is working on some of these things using some AI engines. And they're saying how they go beyond the LLMs and so on. It's too early, but then I think definitely there's a lot of excitement both for us and I think value for the listeners. Other than this, in terms of the format itself, any thoughts on how it can be different? For instance, we've tried some theme-based series. Every March we do that with a women focus and all that. Then during the when the whole epidemic started, at that time we had something based on how people took to dispersion. And as a lead up to this, and immediately after this special episode, we'll be having more conversations on S-curves of people and so on. So from being a generic personal stories alone, whether we should look at theme-based or from this to a season-based thing, which will probably require more efforts to curate and then put it together.
Yeah.
Or I think you were having some thoughts, Gayatri, right, about why limit it only to us or any of those things.
Yeah, certainly. I think we're noticing there's a lot of, I think, energy in a lot of different places. So definitely taking it there, and maybe we could do a season with respect to a particular region, and then look at what's happening there in the context of technology, because this is largely about the creators and consumers of technology. And a good way to sort of do user research of sorts there as well, to understand that ecosystem. I think that, and that could be a theme by itself. Let's say if we could take this to the four corners of this country, just choose four very, I'd say, relatively unheard of places and go and do a couple of conversations and episodes there. I think they could feature once a year, or probably for a few months in the year on the Software People Story. What do you all think?
Yeah, it's a fabulous idea in terms of going in and make it very local. It is also tying to what we're talking about local, right? One of the thinking is the medium. While we often say only audio, I'm seeing many people who are having accessibility issues. For example, hearing is slightly less, right? So having a video attached and then having closed captions added, I'm thinking that could be another way in which we could expand the medium. The second, similar, if not the same, is can we interview people who are differently abled? In fact, I had asked AI chatbot, can you give me a nice name to it? It actually came back and said, hey, accessibility stories. So basically, what is happening is differently abled is one segment. We normally have people who are not able to walk properly and stuff, but over a period of time, thanks to the complexities have increased, and we don't talk about it, be it mentally differently abled or be it having a little bit of eyesight differences, and be it a slight hearing abilities and stuff. We have made it very sensitive for them that we are actually catering only to the mainstream audience of sorts, and that becomes an afterthought. But actually technology is empowering so much be text to speech or speech to text, or the physical payments which are coming in. Lots of things are happening. So one of the thinking processes, we also have to take that medium. We can't just, unless we do that shift, we can't say, okay, we will do a podcast which will be for accessibility kind of abilities that we can do. How do we make that happen? So that way, who are people in education or who are actually developing software for this purpose, and who are personally going through that and having this as another accelerator for them to be in the I think those are the thinking that I was having when we talk about different mediums, different ways in which software is powering them. Shiv, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, I think I'm just overwhelmed with all these thoughts. There are a lot of possibilities. I think we'll take baby steps, and wherever if listeners want to chip in again, I think it'll be a good thing to have more hands on deck, and then they can probably bring in their experiences and then different perspectives. But I particularly like this roadshow kind of a thing. Going to different places, probably doing a session, live recording session, or have some conversation, interact with people in those regions and so on. Yeah.
Yeah. So Gayatri, I think you hit upon a really nice space as well, accessibility coming in a big way. A lot of, we can always reach out to so many, even design school people who have now have it as a very intrinsic part of their curriculum. And yeah, there is a lot of eagerness that I noticed with people to there's a strong desire to communicate. There's a strong desire to share their points of view, their ideas, their thoughts. And I think the space of media is just exploding in all angles. And the good thing is like there's no one right way of doing it. So why not? I mean, I'm pretty much open to a lot of things. So, but at the same time, would also want to see what, if there's a way to figure out what is it that people want more of. That's also a point to consider.
Yeah, one thought triggered by what you said, Chitra, is collaboration with other organizations, other podcasters. Since you mentioned design a couple of times, how can they help us, and how can we help them? And
definitely,
this is not a win-lose. It's a win-win for everyone.
Oh yeah.
I think, see, what happens is this is also a medium which is growing. See, you look at, so much of, investments are coming into this podcasting arena. And earlier, there used to be videos or audios used to be like 5 minutes, 10 minutes. Now, podcast lends itself well for a detailed deep dive. One subject you detail deep dive for an hour. And it's also a nice period for you to complete your walk or a jog or whatever. And then you have a company. You're not alone. So sometimes that loneliness epidemic, this is also driving away, right? So I do think that this is something that I am looking forward to in terms of, how do we help more people and get more hosts also. If someone, as we said again and again, that the hosting has become very lightweight, given all the technologies that we are having, right? So if someone is interested in being a host, we would love to have them on board. And I don't know if we have given that open invitation to folks. Here we are giving open invitation if you would like to come and host even a micro segment, right? For 10 episodes, 5 episodes, something like that. We would love to have you on.
Absolutely. So there's a lot of work ahead for us. And I hope that the 7th year, which I normally call it the 7-year reach, we are able to get over that and then bring more value to all our listeners.
Looks like we're reaching to do more. That's my sense.
Yeah, that's why 6 years. Yeah, on that note, it was really good catching up. I think we should do this more often, even if we don't record this. With all our schedules, we have been definitely keeping the podcast alive and kicking. But then I think a lot more ideas come when we just have a little conversation like this.
Sure, absolutely. So
more jugalbandi.
yeah. No, I just want to say thanks at least for me, thanks to the two of you and to Anita for keeping it going. I know I would definitely like to find some way to step up the engagement and keep it going. Thanks to all of you.
Same here, same here. I also want to personally thank PM Power Consulting for being the consistent sponsor for the last 6 years, right? And there has not been a single question around, even when number of listeners were very less. Now it's increased quite a bit, but even earlier there used to be. So I always want to thank PM Power and of course Shivji and Chitra for initiating me into this wonderful world, and Anita for helping us. And our musician also. Even now whenever I hear that music, I'm smiling from cheek to cheek. That here I'm going to enjoy one more podcast.
Actually, we've never really acknowledged on his request. Siddharth is a specially able person who had composed this tune for us. In fact, he's been asking me, when is your next special and can I get you something? So I told him, give us something at least for a special episode. If you get something, we will include that as well. So a high five to all of us. We'll be back again with our regular programming next week onwards. So this was a special thanks for listening.
Thank you.
Thank you.
We thank Siddharth for the music and Anita for promoting the Software People stories.
If you like this episode,
please subscribe on your favorite podcast client
and spread the word in your network.
If you'd like to share your story,
contact us at podcasts@pm-powerconsulting.com.